Welcome back to the Driven Leadership Podcast, everybody. I realize that I always I fail to introduce myself. So my name is Connor. I'll be your host on today's episode through this journey. And here along with me, riding shotgun, is Eric McGrath.
What's up?
We have an interesting one today. And to be honest, it's been sitting on the board for a while because I don't know how comfortable I am with the conversation. So I'm really curious to hear where you go and how you lead us through this. But basically, we're talking about how to know when somebody's not ready to be a leader. A lot of time, these conversations revolve around how do you know when somebody is set to be a leader? How do you promote people? How do you put people on a growth track? All that stuff. And that may be involved in this conversation. But today, we're really dialing in on how do you, as a senior leader in your organization or in your business, know when that person's just not fully there yet. So that's the idea of it. Where do you want to go here? Where should we start? Because I know we have a lot of paths to take, but
need to clarify just some terminology. So to be a leader, we are all leaders, whether we like it or not, because leadership is just influencing others. So we're all influencing each other. So when we get into this, what we're really talking about is, are they ready to be promoted into either a management role where they're managing other people and there's a leadership aspect that comes with that.
Yeah. That's a good
distinction. When you talk about higher up, they've already been in some type of management role or something along those lines and done that. So we're really talking about somebody that's moving from a doer role in one way or another into a leading people management type role in a business. And when is it? So we've talked a lot about when to do it and how to move them there. So what do we need to avoid? When is somebody not ready to go here?
Yeah.
And I think to start with, most people do not evaluate somebody to be a manager in any way that makes any rational sense, at least to me. Okay. And so we got 5 people in front of us that potentially could be a manager, and we're in that spot. And we get to choose. Okay. That's a different thing than I have one human being that could put in this role and I have to move them into it. Okay. So sometimes people get put in leadership roles because of the needs of the business.
100%.
And so, right. And so when that's taking place, we get a lot of people that are not ready for it, that we just have to move forward with because that's what the business requires.
It's a quote unquote like natural progression. I think, we work a lot with HVAC companies, but I think it runs the gambit in a lot of other service industry companies where it's just you were a good tech, so now you'll be a good manager of the people, of the technicians. It's like,
yeah. So, and we've talked about that on other episodes. That's just that's a big no-no, right?
Yeah.
That's not, so what are we really evaluating in a manager? What are we looking for? Mm-hmm. And so the role of a manager stepping in is they are to take chaos and turn it into structure. And the crazy thing is that they're usually in this middle position where you've got somebody who has vision and clarity and direction and strategy. They are now communicating that into a management level or some, and then that manager is supposed to articulate that, translate it, and get performance out of the people down below in a structured set of rules of this is the way we do it.
I like that you just, in that analogy, called vision chaos. If you want to continue, because you said you turn chaos into structure, and so above the person is the vision, and they're giving which maybe pretty fair.
you and I've talked about this because within Driven, we had a really hard time around the visionary role within EOS. So you got the visionary, you got the integrator, and then you got different roles that happen at a leadership level.
Everything falls underneath.
And I wound up in the visionary role with some reluctance, and the reluctance was, and I was also pretty early in EOS. I'm still early in EOS, but what I keep seeing over and over and over again is chaotic visionaries. Like they bring the hurt to the rest of the organization that just wants to operate. Not always.
Yeah.
But man, so you got these people that have this great vision and all these things, and the creativity and the drive and all the things that make that human being possible are exactly the antithesis of scaling and structure and systems and organization. So I do think sometimes up above is bringing the chaos. Hopefully not in your organization, but
Yeah.
So anyway, so as managers in this role of articulating information, structuring it in such a way and making it work, hopefully for current systems, but sometimes they have to create systems that aren't current, or the business is growing and they have to create systems. So there are several key traits. One of them is, and I just literally had an emotional intelligence class that we were running.
Yeah.
And if you put somebody in a management role and they're managing other human beings and they do not have at least some grasp of emotional intelligence, and they're aware, they're empathetic, they have self-management, they can handle conflict, things of that nature. They don't have some grasp around that. And the only way you're going to know is how they perform under stress, pressure, change. So if someone's under stress, pressure, and change, and they lose their shit, they're not a manager. And I don't just mean one time. I get they could have the one time, but if you know them as somebody that they can't handle that stuff, and there's varying degrees of pressure and change and all of that, but if they can't handle it, then they can't be in a management role, period. Because all they're going to do is they're going to be the ones creating chaos. And, every time something goes sideways, they're going to elevate it.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, you want to get rid of most poor managers. We're done. You get somebody in, they may not even know decision-making, structure, how to connect with people. Like there's all these things they cannot know. If they're emotionally intelligent and aware, all the other stuff gets a lot easier to learn. Yeah. So that's number one. Are they not ready? Well, how do they handle stress, pressure, change, conflict? How do they handle the hot moments?
Yeah. That's huge.
So that's one. Two is I'm looking at discernment. So the ability to make decisions. So are they someone who just wants to be told what to do, or are they somebody that when asked to can make decisions, take ownership and responsibility for those decisions, and drive those decisions to success? So do they have the discernment of making decisions in the moment?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, usually it's where the rubber meets the road. They're dealing with a client. They can't call up the chain every 5 minutes. So they've got to be able to discern whether or not, how do I deal with this? How do I make a decision around this? And how do I move that forward?
Well, that's interesting because when I've heard senior leaders' frustrations about new managers, that always comes up to some degree of just being frustrated. It's like, I just can't wait till they get to the point where they're making decisions on their own. And of course, there's a training period. There's a trial and error there involved. But getting to where there is not just any discernment, but good discernment, like they're making the right decisions on their own, is huge.
I think that especially in America, a lot of people go for the bigger personality and they wind up in leadership roles. So they're louder, or, they make decisions quickly and they do all that stuff. Right. Discernment is not just the ability to make the decision. It is the ability to make a decision that moves us in the right direction. So sometimes the loudest voice, the one that's pushing, is the one that gets elevated, when in reality, they don't make good decisions. They're just loud and they got moved into it. So it's truly discernment that helps, is going that way. Yeah. The ability to, and I hate this word when I'm going to use it, the ability to motivate others. So the word I don't like there is motivates. Okay. Because when I say, if I were to say to you, Connor, I was going to say, go motivate that person. Okay.
Okay.
Most people are going to picture there's something that they're going to do that's going to cause this person to all of a sudden engage better, and they're going to do all these different things. And there are things we can do.
It usually feels like turning the volume up is like the first thought, like yelling,
maybe
fists up. Go.
Yeah, let's go. We go. And we become a cheerleader.
Yeah.
For some people, it's give everybody a trophy. For some people, it's be their biggest cheerleader. It's all those things. That's not it. That's not what motivating employees is. It's the person that can really connect with other people and understand what's going on internally and help them accomplish their goals and what drives them internally. Yeah. So it's connecting the business to the internal motivation and the internal drive. So, I grew up playing soccer, running track and playing soccer. And my dad loved running. Okay. And so he got me running, like the whole family. Big races, all these things. I won some big stuff in college. My uncle was incredible, right? All these things. Heard about my whole life. So I'm running track. My passion was soccer, man. And I was not as good at soccer as I was at track. I was a much better runner. Yeah. And the only reason I was any good at soccer was because I could outrun everybody. That was really, I could only run. But I loved soccer. And so, interesting enough, when I moved into the workplace, but through my life, I had no passion with soccer, no intrinsic motivation. I had the talent, but I didn't have, the skills were there, but I didn't have the drive. And so I went as far as college. In college, I ran some, nothing crazy. But long and short, I had the talent to go somewhere with that, but I didn't have the internal drive. With soccer, I lived it and I loved it. I just didn't have the talent.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, I got so much more out of soccer than I ever did anything else. However, my dad's drive was to get me to do track. Now I'm using this as an example because he could never connect into the intrinsic motivation of what I was after, which I didn't learn this till later. But with soccer, the intrinsic motivation was I actually liked when scoring happened and I got to celebrate with the team, winning and scoring. It wasn't, you run a race and you win a race. That's the part I liked in track. But the work that went into winning a race, fuck that, man. It's a lot of work. Yeah. Soccer, you may be running more, but it's more about the people and the connectivity and all the things that are going on, which I learned later is kind of my bread and butter. That's my intrinsic drive. So when I get into the workplace, if you put me in a situation where I have to do things on my own, I typically struggle. I'm not internally motivated to do it. I have to work hard at it. Even at 52, it's hard. Yeah. Okay. But if you put me in a space where I get to collaborate with a team and we get to solve problems, you can't pull me out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm doing all that to give an example, not to make it about me, but and I definitely can't run track anymore, but or play soccer for that matter. But when we connect to the internal drivers, the things that they need in their life that really bring life to them, and we connect it to the business as a manager, we get crazy results. Now that can be taught, but again, going back to emotional intelligence, we got to have that ability to really connect and work with them to get there.
To connect and work with them, but also the emotional intelligence really ramps up if you have more than one person on your team, because then you're dealing with naturally different motivators where, I think about my kids, which a lot of this stuff anything with leadership can apply to parenting, but I think about like motivating my oldest and my middle child to pick up the Legos on the floor. I tell my oldest, I want to see who can pick the most up. I tell my middle who can do it the fastest. And they're different motivators aiming at the same goal, but it motivates them in completely different ways. And it's just learning that style for them. And so it's not one of those plug and play situations where you find what motivation works for your team. It could be. You could have all high eyes on your team. And so you have a very specific motivator that you can use for everybody. But that's most likely not the case. And so you have to find, which comes with one-on-ones, talking to them, getting to know them, and understanding how can you apply the same common goal through different motivators, which is kind of fun. It's a little puzzle piece.
Well, okay. So you look at that and I mean, you and I've talked about this. I've got to see you in action with managing people, and you just have a natural talent about how you connect with people, how you work with them, how you get them to see a different picture and a vision, and just kind of how you work through them. What you just said is the mindset. It's like this mindset of this is interesting and a puzzle to figure out and to work with them and to get to know them, versus what I call the authoritarian way of management, which is it's my way. I look through my lens, and you're supposed to be motivated by what I am, and everything's a nail. I'm the hammer. I just run around and I hit everything the exact same way. Yeah. And what great managers are curious and interested in the differences and how to connect these, and whether they see it as a puzzle, you see it as like this intellectual thing to map out. I see it as a challenge. Like I see it as, this challenging, maybe puzzle's a way to look at it, but definitely a challenge to overcome or a problem to put together and to figure out. Yeah. But the end result is when that's not there, and what we're I'll say another. So keep him with the theme here. What not to look for is somebody that is needing the significance of the role.
That's huge. Yeah.
Okay. So most people, when they're striving into leadership, they're doing it because they want to feel important. They want to feel significant. They want to stand out. And that's going to come with the role. But if you need that and you're starting to get it, your ego is going to inflate. You're going to be harder to work with. Like there's all these things that come with it. Yeah. So if you got somebody that's got higher emotional intelligence, this is why it's really valuable. Higher emotional intelligence, and I need significance. Everybody needs some level of significance. Okay. For sure, but we're talking, the ego is overly large and they're insecure and they need the significance to feel, you're putting them in that role.
Yeah.
Higher emotional intelligence will go, first of all, they usually will already be working on that. They're already going, okay, this isn't a healthy way to show up and connect with people and work with people. But the ones that have the lower emotional intelligence or this high need of significance combo, and we were just talking, you and I are both on, we're talking through this with a couple of different groups that they have this combination. They have significant driver, core need, and they have and a personality that is kind of the harder personality to work with, kind of defiant, rigid, autocratic, telling where to go. Yeah. And you go, okay, we're going to put them in a management role. They are going to treat it like the military. They're going to run around. They're going to direct everybody. Stand at attention, get at your desk. You're supposed to be here on time, follow the rules, my rules. They're kind of going to be in that place.
Yeah.
And, I don't know why this just popped in my head, but I remember it's crazy. First grade. Okay.
Whoa,
first grade.
Okay.
A little story here.
We haven't gone this far back.
Well, this is one of the few things that remains in my brain from that early on. First grade, we were put, there was some of us got the ability, I don't remember all the rules around it, but we got to be in charge of the class while they worked on something.
Okay.
For, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I don't know the duration.
Yeah.
But our job was to be the teacher. We didn't really teach. They already had things they were working on, but we were to be the teacher and we were in charge. And it was me and like 2 or 3 other people. And it rotated. Everybody got a chance to be in charge. Okay. And just kind of feel what it was. And I can still remember, I don't know how all this went down, but I can remember walking up and down the aisles, the rows of seats. Okay. While everybody's working, I had a ruler in my hand and I'm popping it in my hand as I walk up and down the aisle. And I'm like,
that's a core memory for you. They made you sound like Darth Vader, like the first time I felt power.
So, but no, it's so crazy because, and especially at that time, but it carried over, needing significance and power and to be an authority. And then I was given it. Yeah. And I'm walking around with a freaking ruler, like I'm literally popping it in my hand. I can still remember this because it was so like, oh, man, I see managers, and yes, they're not walking up down the aisle with a ruler, and maybe they're not that way, but underneath it's similar. It's just projected as an adult.
All right.
And anyway, so
it's interesting, that significance piece, balancing it or needing to balance it, because the significance comes from like the 6 core needs that everybody has. And we talk about it mostly in our change management class.
Right.
But it directly runs up against another core need that other people on the team have, which is contribution. So if you have somebody that is overly significant, and this is like really simplifying it for the sake of using these terms, but if you have somebody in the position that needs significance and they're putting in this like overly significant place, then that will innately suppress the contribution of the people around them and stifle their growth, which is another core need, and stifle the trust innately of the team because they don't feel like they have any significance because it's all being taken up by this black hole, this dictator who's walking up and down the aisles with the ruler, threatening to pop him upside the head.
Maybe not the tater part of that word went off, more just the dick walking up and down the aisle. But
that's awesome. I never heard that one. I didn't know what you meant. I was like, tater. Did I? What did I say?
Drop the tater. Drop the tater. It's just a dick.
Drop the tater. That's awesome.
Yeah, but no, and I wonder if it's this way. I guess I probably think about it through significance because that would be one of mine, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like that's always been a need going through life more than others for me.
Yeah.
But I'd be willing to bet you could take the same thing if we're way out of balance in any of these, and we become that black hole. If it's certainty or uncertainty, love and connection, right? Those are the four kind of base ones, and then we get into growth and contribution. If we're massively in need on one of those, when we get into a leadership role, we're going to be driven to create it, and we may have some unhealthy ways we're doing it.
Yeah.
Now, if we need desperate certainty in a management role, then we may be so rigid and controlling to make sure everything is exactly right. If we need uncertainty, I can see where they're constantly changing things and creating all these changes that go on. So I think I'm going on a limb and saying that significance is just my lens,
Right.
But it could be anybody's. And too much of something is probably a bad thing there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I know there's other things that would say, why is a manager not ready? Yet, and I didn't even, this is really off the cuff. We just kind of started talking about this, but for me, I still go back to where we started this, emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And man, if you're not testing for emotional intelligence when you're putting somebody in a management role, there's so many assessments out there. We have one that has emotional intelligence. They said, why aren't you testing for it?
I was going to say, like, how do you evaluate? Because I think some people get bogged down with that, with all of these, thinking that they can't test for it and they have to vibe it out, so to speak, which I would say is not
easy.
the case.
Like, there are assessments. We have assessments, but there are other assessments out there that directly test for these things or indirectly test for them, and you get the response. And if you're not doing assessments when you're hiring and moving people into roles, then you're really shooting into the dark. There's so many things to shortcut it. To kind of, anybody starts a new role, or I should say, especially starting with a company, you're going to get their best work for 3 to 6 months. So what happens after the 3 to 6 months? And so that's what assessments do, is they give us the foreshadowing of here's how they work or behave as we're moving forward. So
and I think
those are
spending time also, because I know sometimes, like, we kind of what we were saying at the beginning, people feel like they get in this position where you have to promote somebody into a leadership. You have to have this manager fill a gap that maybe they're taking the time to do some sort of evaluation based on something other than work output is going to, it's going to save you in the long run. Because, like you said, you could get 6 months down the road with a leader that was good in all these other areas, but then after that, then you're going backwards. Your team is falling apart. Then you got to replace that leader. You got to start over. You got to do all these things. So, like, we preach a lot kind of on this podcast. Take time to do it. Sit down, do the coaching, do the evaluations, figure these things out, avoid making a mistake that could be avoided. And hey, if they're good in some of these areas, put them as a manager of systems. No people involved.
That's very real. That's good. The other side of this, let's say you're in a position, you got to promote someone. Like, they're the person, they're what you got. You don't want to go external for the role. We need to promote this person, but they're not there. Do the assessments anyway, know the gap, and get them focused on the gap. There's ways to grow and develop. Emotional intelligence, anybody can grow in. You just got to work at it. Awareness, those things. Discernment, you can learn discernment. So these aren't like impossible to get there, but there's got to be a focus put on it instead of just promoting them into a role and praying they figure it out, because they're more than likely not.
Yeah, that's actually huge, because the reality is there are people that need to promote the person that may not be right, but doing the assessments, even in the advanced insights class that we take to get certified to train others to read their assessments, he talks so much about awareness precedes acceptance. And acceptance precedes change. And so, in order for that person to change and become the leader that you need them to be, they have to become aware, and they become aware by seeing the results. And if they make the decision, like, I'm low in these areas, I'm not going to work on it, that's a different conversation that may involve them not being in that position ever. but at least you know, and you know more than just, oh, well, I feel like they could be good, you know? So,
which is 95% of management promotion, in my opinion, is that I think it'll be good. I like them.
Gosh, you might as well just roll a dice, brother. Like, I've seen it. I've done the same. I've put people in those managerial positions that I just needed a body to open the building. And then 5 months down the road, they're yelling at me in the stairwell saying, I didn't ask for this. And I'm like, oh man. Well, you're right. You didn't.
The things that happen to you guys in the stairwells.
Well, this has been a shorty, but a goodie. I think, one last tool, I think, if you have somebody that's not ready to be a leader, send them this episode. The title will just be how to know when somebody's not ready to lead. So that
won't be a smack in the face at all. I'm sure that'll be just fine.
Just a gentle nudge. Be like, hey, I thought about you while I was listening to this.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Well, as always, thanks for listening, everybody. Eric, thanks for your guidance and wisdom in this. If you have any questions or comments about anything we talked about, if you want to get in touch and get an advanced insights test, that's the emotional intelligence assessment that Eric was mentioning, hit us up, podcast@drivenleadership.com. We can get you those assessments and then train you in them, train your whole team in it. Have awareness across your whole leadership team. So,
I know. Cool.
Awesome. Well, see you next week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.